What's happening, YouTube? Welcome back. So recently I just reached top 50 in the world. Before that, my highest ever was only 380th. So you must be wondering how I did it. How was I able to win so many games in a row? And the answer to that is by playing classic capitals with manual setup, fog of war, and progressive cards. The key to winning in this strategy is to only play against novice ranked players or beginners. Basically, people who don't know what they're doing or are unfamiliar with these settings. This strategy also works against masters and grandmasters because these settings are very skill based, and if you make any mistakes, like if you block your army like the yellow player is doing in Australia, then it's very easy to take advantage, even if you're going second. Because now all I need to do against yellow in this situation is execute the 4 continents endgame strategy, and realizing that he's out of options, the yellow player fortified his army out, but it's too late. Because on this turn, I can straightly invade him and capture his capital and win this game with ease. No matter if you're going first or second, always pick North Africa as your first territory to place your capital on. The reason for this is because it's the best place to put your capital, as you can easily capture Africa, and if they invade you, they will unleash your army, which you can use to capture a lot of territory. And it's also very good because you can expand into Europe or South America or even into North America. So in this game, I'm going first, and like I said, I'm going for North Africa. Seeing that the blue player put his capital in South America makes me very happy because I can actually block him, and it's very difficult for him to come back. Now all I need to do is take as many territories as possible while making sure that my capital is still relatively strong and safe from him trying to capture it. As you can see, even after the first turn, the game is over, just based on where he put his capital. By placing his capital in a blocked place, in the last game in Australia, in this game in South America, they made it very easy for me just to expand, capturing territory and continents along the way, and make it impossible for them to do anything because I'm leaving their army blocked. So on my next turn, I'm getting 20 or more troops, which is more than enough to destroy them and win very easily. So now that you know the best strategy to win, going first or second, by placing your capital on North Africa, it's on to the next part of the strategy, the placements. For Africa, you should always take North Africa, Madagascar, South Africa, and the Congo, leaving Egypt and East Africa open, unblocked, so that your army in North Africa can very easily go through into Asia, or if needed, into Europe. For South America, you should always pick Argentina and Peru. That way, when you have your capital in North Africa, you can very easily go through Brazil and Venezuela into North America, and then very easily capture that as well. For North America, you should always begin by capturing Western United States, and then on your next selections, always pick Quebec and Alberta. By picking these specific territories in South America and North America, your army in North Africa is free to move through South America and North America and capture both of them, and then even expand into Africa and Asia, or even into Australia if necessary. For Europe, you should only take Northern Europe, leaving every single other territory for your opponent. You don't want to take any of the other territories in Europe. And the reason for that is this is the best placement for your capital on North Africa because it creates a clear path for your North African army in order to access Europe and Asia without being blocked. Alternatively, if you chose to instead take Western Europe and Southern Europe, the problem with that is you will end up blocking yourself. As you can see in this current board state, it's impossible for me to go into Europe with my North African army. So the blue player has done a very good job of making it very difficult for me to do anything because he is holding South America and my army is blocked in North Africa by his capital, and my territories in Europe are also preventing me from capturing many territories. When you are choosing your territories in Australia, always begin with Eastern Australia, because that allows you to very easily take over Australia without blocking yourself. And if you are going second, and if your opponent is placing their capital in Australia, you should always prevent them by taking at least one territory in Australia to prevent them from getting a free bonus from going first. And you should always pick Siam, because this makes it very difficult for them to actually expand from Australia, because you can oftentimes make it so that they pick China and India. And if they do that, then by having your troop on Siam and having them place their capital on Indonesia, for example, you will effectively block them in Australia. So even though they're holding a continent, they are blocked from the rest of the world, making it very difficult for them to do anything. If you have your capital in North Africa, then you can capture South America, North America, Europe, and Africa, and then execute the 4 continents strategy against them. In the worst case scenario, in the very unlikely event that your opponent picks their capital on North Africa, you should always try to put your army in an unblocked place, either in Ukraine or in a territory in Europe which has access to North America and Australia. So in a couple of practice matches against top players, I have placed my capital in Southern Europe before, I have placed it in Ukraine before, and I've even placed it in Northern Europe one time. But in most situations, you should always try to go for your capital on the Middle East if you're going second, and if your opponent correctly chooses their capital on North Africa. And if you do all of your placements correctly, then you can actually try to make it very difficult for the North African player by always invading them into Africa, leaving their army blocked by never taking Brazil, and never capturing Ukraine or the other 3 territories in Europe, so that their capital in North Africa will be blocked, and they can only use deployment troops in order to take territories outside of Africa and Europe, which are connected to their capital. And what basically happens is you are constantly invading them into Africa, and you are constantly trying to capture Australia. Now, at the end of the day, this is basically a war of attrition. You are trying to capture as many territories as possible in order to limit how many troops they get each turn, and make sure that you get more troops than them, so that your capital becomes larger than theirs, and once the time is correct, you can try to blitz their capital for the victory. And that's exactly what happens in this game. I saw that the purple player left his capital pretty weak with only 11 troops, and that's when I decided to turn in my set and go for the attack, which was a 78% chance, and it worked for me. For Asia, always pick Japan, Siberia, and any other territories bordering Siberia, so that your army in Africa is not blocked. Before any game that you play with your opponent, you should always check their stats. You can do this by clicking on their profile and making sure that they are who they say they are, that they are a novice or beginner. And the way to know this is you need to make sure that they have very horrible stats. So essentially, if you see someone who has, for example, 1 win with 11 losses, or someone with 0 wins and 44 losses, then you should obviously try to play against them because they are a low-ranked opponent, and the chances of them knowing the strategy for classic capitals and knowing what to do are very low, which means that you will have a very, 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 very high chance of winning against them. And that's exactly the kind of win rate that you need to get a high position on the leaderboard. As for me, I got a 60 plus game win streak, followed by a 21 game win streak to the 50th ranked player in the world. And you can actually do even better. I know of someone who got a 95 game win streak using these settings and only playing against low-ranked players like novices and beginners. So once you know who to play against by looking at their stats, and after you have picked all of the correct territories in the manual selection, the game is essentially predetermined before the game has even started, because you have specifically decided to play against a noob player who doesn't know what they are doing, and you have specifically chosen the most optimal strategy against them, which means that the chances of them having any chance at all are very low, next to zero. I must caution you, no matter how tempting it might be to play against higher ranked players like experts, masters, or grandmasters, or even some intermediates, don't do it. Only play against novices and beginners. The reason for this is novices and beginners have no clue as to what they're doing. Another reason why to play against novices and beginners rather than higher ranked opponents, even though higher ranked opponents give you more rank for winning against them, is the fact that you actually lose exactly the same from a high ranked opponent as you would for a novice or beginner. So why take the risk of playing against someone who is higher ranked and potentially knows how to play correctly, and if they're lucky or if they go first, has a decent chance of winning, if you can instead just play against a noob, novice, or beginner who doesn't know what they're doing, and the chances of you winning are extremely high, especially since you lose exactly the same from a low-ranked opponent as a high-ranked opponent. Now, this game was actually the luckiest game of my life ever. The reason for that is because this novice was one turn from ending my streak. If he had simply placed his troops and blitzed my capital, he would have won. Instead of doing that, he allowed me to very easily capture his capital after I was super unlucky attacking a 20 against 6 capital and losing 12 troops or 13 troops. I thought it was over, especially when he won that 6 against 4 capital attack and lost 0 troops. I thought it was game over for me and my streak was over. However, I actually won because he was a novice. If it was any other player, they would have won in that situation. And that's exactly why you play against novices, because even when they're one turn away from winning, they don't realize it, and you can actually manage to win in the most absurd ways possible. Literally, all he needed to do was blitz my capital and win the game. But instead of that, he wasted his troops, capturing Australia and Africa, and left his capital completely unguarded with only one troop, which allowed me to turn in a set and take him out. By the way, if you're curious, for every one loss, you have to win 15 games against novices or 10 games against beginners just to make up what you lost. Classic Capitals is the best 1 versus 1 strategy, especially if you don't have any of the maps. If you're just a free-to-play player trying to get by, then this is the best way to rank up, guaranteed.